Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. It's engineering week. Let me see you guys. Well, I guess I can't see you guys, but everybody come on, engineering week. We're here. My name is Ashley Floyd. I am a Carter Rock employee. I've been on rotation with Naval X, so that's why we get to use fancy platforms like Zoom Government. And hopefully you guys can join in. If you guys are having issues, please send me an email because I'll be monitoring that as well. I'm also on Microsoft Teams. I just wanted to give you guys some logistics for today. I miss you, fam. I just got to say it. I miss my Carter Rock family. So yes, if you guys would like to ask questions, like this is going to be a really engaging webinar. So we're going to have a lot of questions in the chat. We're going to have a lot of conversations in the chat. I hope you guys took your surveys because we're going to get to that later. So we do have a chat function for you guys to talk about different things. Also, we have a question and answer function. So if you guys have any questions for the panelists or any of the speakers, please use the question and answer function. The reason being is that once we're able to get into where we're answering those questions, they'll be captured in the question and answer function versus lost in the chat. So you guys do have the option to talk in the chat. But if you have questions and answers, please direct them to the question and answer function, and then we'll get this. If you guys missed this webinar, it's okay. We recorded it, and we'll send it out to the command. I'm looking forward to a really exciting program today, and look forward to getting into this analysis because I love this stuff. So welcome Engineers Week. Shout out to engineers. Sorry, lawyers and legal and contracts and all that. We love you guys too. But this is all like a big family thing. So welcome to the webinar, and I'm going to kick it off over to Steve, who's going to introduce what we're going to be doing for today.
Hey, thank you very much, Ashley. Much appreciated. So good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome the Carter Rock family to the first of our Engineers Week events. This year, we celebrate the 70th anniversary of Engineers Week. First established in 1951 by the National Society of Professional Engineers, the week coincides with the birthday of George Washington, really America's first engineer. A couple of years ago, I talked about President Washington's history as a surveyor and an engineer. This year, I'd like to go back a little further and reintroduce you to one of the world's very first engineers, and an important figure really in the history of Carter Rock, and that's Archimedes. So Archimedes was born in 287 BC on the island of Sicily, which was part of the Greek Empire back in those days, and he became one of the most famous mathematicians, inventors, and engineers in ancient Greece. Especially important to us, Archimedes is credited with inventing the science of mechanics and hydrostatics. Some of his more famous discoveries and inventions include levers, fulcrums, and pulleys, all of which make it easier for us to move heavy objects with small forces. He invented one of the most fundamental concepts of physics, the center of gravity. He also invented the Archimedes screw, which uses a screw enclosed in a pipe to raise water from one level to another. And lastly, he is known for his formulation of a hydrostatic principle known as Archimedes' principle that says a body in a fluid is acted on by an upward force equal to the weight of the fluid that the body displaces. This is one of the core principles that's the basis for naval architecture and ship design. The story of how Archimedes discovered the method for determining the volume of irregular shapes may or may not be true, but it states that while he was getting into a bath, he noticed that the water level rose as he got in. So excited by his discovery, he got out and shouted through the streets, "Eureka!" Of course, this was Greek for "I have found it." So I'm not sure if they shouted Eureka when they discovered their idea, but I do want to introduce Damien Britell, the head of the Maritime Systems Hydromechanics branch. Damien is going to tell us about a technology developed and patented by a team that included Carter Rock engineers and lawyers for non-lethally stopping or slowing any water jet propelled craft. Like many of the things we do, it took a team of engineers and non-engineers to get this through the patent process. This is important since shortly we'll be hearing from our keynote speaker, Ms. Ann Collier, who will help us understand how our problem-solving style can impact how we work in projects and work as a team. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Damien.
Hi, thank you very much, Mr. Ouimet. I'm going to work on a screen share here. Hopefully I'll get this right. Ashley or Steve, are you seeing the right thing with the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm gonna give a little presentation. I'll leave a little bit of time for questions. But we'll go through here. I'm kind of dual hatted here. I'm a branch head of Code 881, as Mr. Olmett mentioned. And I'm also the Department 80 representative to the Invention Evaluation Board. But before I did those, I won a few patents. I was lucky enough to be on some projects with some other really smart people and be part of some patents that we've submitted and got awarded. So the patent I'm specifically talking about today is the device for non-lethal stoppage of a water jet propelled craft. So as with any patent, they're publicly released, so you can go to Google Patents or USPTO and look, do some searches, look things up if you want to learn more, learn a little bit about what a patent tends to look like. So this patent here, I'm a co-inventor with lead inventor Andrew Krause, and the other inventors listed. So this came about with a project that was a collaboration between West Bethesda and Combatant Crafts. So you'll see, like a lot of things we do at Carter Rock, there's a lot of collaboration between different entities. So you'll see a lot on there. And this patent was issued in 2019, but actually, some patents can go through in about a year. Some patents can take 5 or 6. So this was one of those longer ones. So we actually submitted this in the 2014 or 15 range or so. So just depends on how long the USPTO takes to get it approved or rejected. So, so like a lot of people at Carter Rock, we were trying to solve a very unique problem. Something that on the surface might not seem like that big of a deal, but actually once you dig into it, it becomes very complex. So the problem we were trying to solve was, how do you stop a personal watercraft, something like a jet ski? So there's a lot of reasons you might want to stop one. It could be something, they could be heading towards a, naval asset. They could be drug running. They could be getting away. There's a lot of reasons you'd want to stop them. The simplest conventional way, of course, is to use kinetics and artillery, but that's only appropriate in some situations. I mean, you might not be sure what their intent is. It could be a tourist out, in the bay that your ship's in that, lost control of it or got confused or is not hearing the, the warnings. So a lot of reasons that you might want to stop a jet ski, non-lethally. So there's other ways you can do it, nets, things like that, but we saw in some cases you don't have time to deploy them, or you don't want to cause more damage. So this is just one such goal that we had to solve. So, so the unique goals I have listed up here is non-lethal to the operator, ideally no irreversible damage to the vessel, nothing that would require you to pull the vessel out of the water and rebuild the engine or replace the impeller. Ideally removable without pulling it out, whether that means divers or someone reaching over the side or something that would degrade and leave the impeller and set it free. And then also something that can be quickly deployable from various distances. So definitely a lot more going on to that challenge. So the big challenge was, how do we get this device from a ship or a boat into the impeller? So you'll see here, there's a picture of just one such impeller setup that you'd find in a personal watercraft or jet ski. I'm going to use the terms interchangeably here. But you can see, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but that's fine. So you can see the 2 intakes on the schematic on the lower right. And that's where whatever device would need to go in, that's where the water is ingested into the jet ski and then accelerated by the impeller and shot out the back. So it's definitely a lot harder to get to that impeller than say a propeller on a conventional watercraft or something like that. So, so there's a challenge there. So some of the characteristics we were looking for was it had to be heavy enough to launch. If it was too light when it got shot or thrown, it would just kind of flap in the wind or drift off. So it had to be stable enough to fly straight. So you couldn't just launch any old net or thing at it. It had to be the right buoyancy too. That ended up being one of the hardest things because you want it to be at the surface of the water, but kind of below it enough to get to the intakes. So, and you don't want it to be too negatively buoyant, otherwise you'll shoot it in the water and it'll zip to the bottom and you'll never see it, never get its effect. It had to be the right length to get to the inlets, all that too. So once you get it down to the inlets, you have the other challenge that has to be flexible, malleable enough to actually get sucked into there. So not blocked by the grates. So a couple different, grates and things that would have to get by on different models. So also had to be soft enough to not, damage the impellers. If you shot something and got like a slug of lead or something in there, that might stop it suddenly and cause damage. So another desirable trait was hydrophilic, so it absorbs water and it expands and it becomes tacky as well. So we found some materials that would do that. So that helps you block the flow or, mess with the lifting surfaces on the impeller. So it produces thrust. So also didn't want to be something that would just shoot right through there and get ejected. And like I said, ideally removable or dissolvable. So a lot of unique things there. And what we came up with is meets most of those. So kind of the reason I put that out there is to think, this is one of those things that people might think, oh, this is so obvious, I came up with this. But you just got to remember you're sometimes addressing a problem that no one in the world has ever needed to address, or very few people. So even if it's something that might be obvious to you, it's definitely worth seeing if it's been done. So what we came up with here was a pretty standard t-shirt. I think this is a commercial off-the-shelf t-shirt cannon that our team of inventors worked with to put these devices into canisters. So this is something that we've tested at the OMSAT outdoor facility up in New Jersey, as well as out at sea in a couple different locations. I think this picture is down somewhere around Little Creek. And then in the center, you've got one of the devices. So the patent covers a variety of different, different realizations of the device, but this is the general gist of what they are. And then the lower right's kind of a schematic, which shows you it's got a weighted head, so it flies like kind of like that kid's toy you might see that I think they call it a comet. So it's got the weight in the head, so it flies head first. And then it's got some flotation in there to offset that. And it's got what we're calling the tentacles that come up and kind of float to the surface of the water. So when all works well, it's packed, it shoots out quick, it gets to where it's going, it sets up in the water, and it gets ingested. So going over to the next one. So the pictures on the left actually show some of the successful hits that we've seen. So you can see the grate there and the challenge of getting something through there. And then it wraps up on the shaft and ideally on the impeller. So when it does that, it'll, ideally greatly reduce your thrust. And depending on what the program is looking for, sometimes they just want to slow it. Sometimes they want to stop it. So certainly could be developed to get the desired result there. So when we came out of this, the next one, I'll go back a second. So when we came out of this, we went and we realized we did this and put in for a patent, and it happened to be something no one's ever done before. So that worked out really well for us, and we were able to get a patent award. So kind of going to the next step, why do we seek a patent? Some people might ask, okay, what's the value in this? So just I'm not going to read it off here, but quoting from the Carter Rock Patent Guide, it talks about the importance of getting the patent for the Navy, how it protects us, because there's been cases where Navy's invented something and industry has ran with it, and then the Navy's actually had to pay to use their own invention. So it promotes the image of Carter Rock. It's really neat. It's one of the few public release distribution A, goes to everyone things. It's really good for that. Also helps give us a good association with innovation. So and obviously not everything we do at Carter Rock can be patented. If it can't be publicly released, or if it's classified, you have to do a classified patent or go different routes. So I'll show you on the next slide, but I kind of show you your first people to talk to before you work out a disclosure. So and then as a side little thing, it's something nice you can put on your resume, something nice you can put out there. Anyone can Google your name, and ideally the first search will be your patent, something very flattering. And there are typically cash bonuses for the submission and getting it through the patent office. So there's really three main steps to a patent. It's getting an invention disclosure written up and getting that to the Invention Evaluation Board. And then when that's approved, the lawyers do a lot of the heavy lifting there and write it up into the patent submission, and goes off to the USPTO, the patent, part of the government that issues the patents. And then if that gets awarded, then you're smooth sailing there. So So you hopefully maybe you're asking yourself, hey, I've got an idea. What do I do? Where do I go from here? You can contact pretty much any one of the people up here, and we'll either talk to you or we'll point you to the right person. So I think he's on the chat too, but Dave Gatz, the lead patent attorney here at Carter Rock, great guy to work with. And then he have his other people that work with him down below it. Or another first point of contact for you could be to reach out to your department representative from the Invention Evaluation Board. So as I mentioned, I'm the representative for Department 80, and then Jim Bluebeck is Department 70, and Scott Sergio is Department 60. So any of us are usually pretty glad to reach out and discuss with people. So my last point before I open up, if there's any questions or anything, is just to say don't delay, because if it's been publicly disclosed or you presented at a conference or something, that starts the clock, and we will lose the rights. It will become public domain after about a year. So if there's any concerns, please talk to Dave Gatt, and especially if you're going to go to a conference, you definitely want to talk to an attorney first, because they could file a provisional patent, something like that. So that's my last slide. So I'm going to open it up if you want to do any questions or anything, or not sure where I'm at on time there.
I don't see any questions in the question and answer, but guys, yeah, get those questions out. You have Damien right here. He's the pro. He just gave us all this good information and clearly has patents going on. So he's the guy to ask.
So Ashley, I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yeah. Hi, Steve.
Okay, great. Damien, from soup to nuts, how long does the process take for your particular patent?
So it usually depends on how long to do the initial submission, but you can usually get that done in a couple days to a month and get that to the Invention Evaluation Board to evaluate it. The board meets quarterly, but certainly we'll do emergency meetings if it's something really urgent, like, hey, this contractor already saw this, we need to protect it. So that could take a couple months there. So then it gets assigned out to a lawyer. The IEB approves it, and they'll write it up and get it to the patent, USPTO. So you're looking at about maybe 6 months to a year for that whole first block. And then once it's out of Carter Rock's hands, it's up to the USPTO's roulette machine, which we've seen, I believe the quickest we've seen was about 6 or 7 months, which was astonishingly quick. And we've seen some where they keep saying, give us a little more info, give us a little more info. And that does tend to drag it out to the 5-6 year range. But Dave Gatt would have the average, but I would say probably about 2 years at their point. So probably looking at about 2-3 years start to finish.
Thanks.
I did get a question. What are some of your biggest challenges in the patent approved, to getting a patent approved?
Well, you got to make sure it's not something someone else has done, and you just do a quick initial search on that. But the attorneys can do a really thorough search to make sure. So that could be a challenge, is if there's something similar but not quite the same, the attorneys will have to write it up to show that it's unique. Other challenge I kind of touched on is Carter Rock doesn't want, understandably, all their technology out there for the whole world. So if you came up with something really clever that's going to go on a surface ship, it might need to be written up, kind of a little beat around the bush or remove sensitive things. So that can be a challenge to get public release and to get a tech warrant order to sign off on that and get it to move forward. Once it's over to the USPTO, we got some good attorneys here. We don't usually get too much pushback. Sometimes there's little pedantic things and like that. Software is a harder one to patent. That's been made harder in the last few years by some legislative changes and a Supreme Court case. So, but there's ways to get that through as well. But, for something like we had where no one else was really operating in that area, knock on wood, it was smooth sailing.
Nice. So do you have any other examples of some software patents? I don't know if you have knowledge of them, but someone asked that.
Yeah, our branch has one that is being filed right now for something called MAXHUB, Maneuvering and Control Simulation, Simulink module that a couple of our people put together. What really helps the software get through is when it's tied to something physical. So our team does their modifications in the software and then actually runs that into a UUV and actually can see what their software did right away. So that really helps you with your patent because it's coupling the software with hardware. So our lead on that is Sasha Saru. So if you got questions on that, you can reach out to me or him.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what about this question? How early in the process of you having of someone having an idea, do we want to like start bringing in people? Because what I'm guessing from this question is, you know, I have an idea, but when should I start the patent process?
You know, I would say pretty early. I mean, if you know, people will reach out to me and sometimes say, hey, I had this cocktail napkin idea, and I can kind of point them towards, okay, well, here's what to check on, here's this. If it's in a sensitive area too, they might want to say, okay, well, let's meet and see where we go, because patents isn't always the direction if it's something you know, secret or sensitive. You know, there's a lot of great people at the you know, technology office as well that would be glad to meet with people and start discussing. I know Joe Teeter has meetings with people all the time to kind of, you know, bounce ideas back and forth and come up with a good path. So I would say sooner rather than later. I know that's a little bit of a cop out, but you don't want to get scooped. It's first to file. So if you think of it at the same time that the contractor thinks of it and they file it first, you've lost it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I said, you know, first come, first serve, right?
It is.
And but you did mention something that this actually goes into the next question. What about the classified patents? Because you said like, you know, when someone has an idea, they might not want it out there for like, you know, public to see. So what if it's classified, or what if it's a really, really sensitive idea?
Sure. Let me just do my disclosure. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the main person, but I'll speak for Dave Gadd on that. And apologies, Dave, if you're watching. My understanding is that it gets written up like a normal patent and filed away into a SCIP, and it gives the protections without the release. But you know, you're not going to be able to put that on your resume, and you're not going to be able to Google that. So there's ways to go on that. I know. Not going to say more on that you know, don't want to give too much away.
Good job. Always got to cover yourself. Say, oh, by the way, this is not. We do have
I
legal
am
on the
not a
line, and
lawyer.
yeah, they'll chime in the chat. Say, no, Damien, that's wrong.
This is
I
not
don't.
legal advice.
Right. I don't see any other questions, but if you guys have any other questions, you can drop them in, and I'm sure Damien will be able to answer them in the chat, and as well as if Jim or Scott are on the line, they also can probably answer some questions in the chat. So thanks, Damien.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see, is Larry on?
So I think Larry's having some technical difficulties, so I will be doing the introductions
Okay.
for our keynote speaker, if that's okay, Ashley.
Yes.
All right, cool. So first off, thank you, Damien, for sharing your innovative work by you and your team and on how to stop water jet propelled craft. That's a vital capability that our fleet needs, and you're bringing it to them. And so again, thank you to the team and all the other folks that put in patents. These are obviously great ideas that, you know, we hope will transition into the fleet eventually. So again, welcome to all of our Carderock family to our Engineers Week celebration. While this event celebrates Engineers Week, I hope that the entire Carderock family is listening in, technical and business, because our keynote speaker's topic today is relevant to all disciplines in the workforce today. So the theme of this year's Engineers Week is Imagining Tomorrow. So this is an incredibly timely topic, considering the year we have had with COVID, the pandemic, and learning to work remotely while providing still the great support that we provide, the mission that we accomplish for the Navy, for us. When I imagine tomorrow, as the theme suggests, you know, I see a lot of transformations in the future, digital transformation being one of them. And that's really going to be the theme for our second event that's going to celebrate Engineers Week. So a little bit of a teaser there. Next week, be on the lookout for that event. And we'll have that with some other speakers and another event next week. But when I imagine tomorrow, I also see a lot of constants. None of the challenges that we faced yesterday or will face tomorrow will be overcome by any one individual. As we've shown, it does take a team. Last, a year ago, we were all together face to face in conference rooms solving problems. Today, we're doing that virtually, over Teams or Zoom like we are right now. And so we have to, work on how we operate as a team. And that's really key to today's keynote. This keynote address is led by Miss Ann Collier, who is a professional certified coach specializing in leadership, team, and organizational development. And so her focus today is walking us through the adoption innovation continuum and helping us understand how our problem-solving style can impact how we work on projects and how we work together on a team. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ann. Thank you.
Steve, thanks so much for the introduction. And Damien, even though you're not a lawyer and I am, you still did a much better job on the explaining patents than I could ever do. And in fact, I'm so interested in how teams work together. You set me up perfectly, because the patent, the work, the fact that you've got a multidisciplinary team, that you've got engineers who think differently to create, your various technological advances. That's all a result of taking advantage of and leveraging different problem-solving styles. So thank you. So Steve did not mention, and I did, I am a lawyer, but I gave that up years ago. Being a tax lawyer is not as much fun as you might think it is. And what I do now, as Steve said, is work with leaders and teams and helping them be the absolute best that they can be. Today, we're focused on adaptation innovation theory. We're going to take a deeper dive into the components, including brainstorming style, what it looks like to implement differently, and then what we call rule group conformity. Please, excuse me, please ask questions throughout, but I'm going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for a more open discussion. In terms of outcomes, and it's all about outcomes, we really want you to be able to maximize your problem-solving style through awareness and a personal effectiveness techniques. So on our Learning Collaborative Management Academy a couple weeks ago, one of the participants says, now that I know what my problem-solving style is, I can deploy it even more effectively. So I just thought that was a terrific insight. And then also using insights about different problem-solving styles to navigate struggles that can arise from working with colleagues who are a little bit different than you are, which is a benefit, but a challenge. And then just lead managing and collaborating more effectively. So if you grew up in the 80s or the 90s, you have a picture somewhere in your family archives of you and your family wearing all the same clothes. So I'm not showing you this to show you how bad the fashion was back then, but more to make the point that, we all try to fit in, right? We all try to fit in with our peers, our family members, and we notice when we don't fit in. I was about 8 or 9 years old when I realized that I was different than my entire family. And it took me another 20 years when I got Myers-Briggs certified to realize that not only am I the only extrovert in a family of introverts, but that my problem-solving style is really different, not just from my family, but than most people. Well, my first professional career was as a tax lawyer at the IRS. And as you can imagine, I didn't quite fit in there. And so when we don't fit in, the question always is, what's going on? And what we've got is cognitive diversity. And what it feels like is, somebody speaking to you in a foreign language and expecting you to understand. There's just a mismatch. In a more technical way of looking at it is, you all come to work, or actually log on now that we're doing this virtually, to solve problem A. Problem A is the task at hand. Problem A is why you're hired, the work that you're doing. And then what gets in the way is problem B. And problem B is the challenge of working with people with different collaboration styles than you. And what it sounds like is a little bit like Amanda, who complains that Mark doesn't pay attention to details, or Ian, who complains that Mark never thinks outside the box, that he's too structured. Notice they're both complaining about the same person, but from a different perspective. And that perspective is like we're wearing different glasses. So when you think about problem solving style, it colors your how you look at the world. It affects what you see. So if we were there in person, we'd be handing you different colored glasses and we'd have some fun seeing and asking you what this added up to be, what the numbers on the screen added up to be. And you know, you'd shout it out and you'd say different things depending on what your glass is on. Life is like that. We're all seeing things differently and processing information differently because of our hardwiring. So another way to, and here's the full screen. And the point is that, you know, you talked a lot about teams. Steve talked about it. Damien talked about it, that when we don't have a full team with different skill sets, different ways of solving problems, we miss things. You know, maybe we don't file the patent early enough. Maybe somebody scoops us on us. By the way, that rule just doesn't seem fair to me. And you know, another way of thinking about it, if you've seen this, you know, if you look towards the left of this, you think it's a duck. If you look towards the right, it's a bunny. The basic point is that we see things really differently. And further, we're all creative. In fact, we solve problems every day as a part of getting through life, right? We just do it differently. We have different approaches. And that's the benefit to, for example, solving the problem that Damien outlined in the prior presentation. So just include this in the chat, text in, imagine that you've got a new problem. You can't solve it by yourself, and you need colleagues. What does problem solving style look like when it's working well? We'll let some of those answers keep coming in and I'll read them out, but I'm going to show you, the next slide is going to show you some differences in problem solving style. So many of you were able to take the assessment, and if you haven't taken it and are still interested, just reach out to Sylvia. She can give you the information for it. But in the blue band, we've got a very structured kind of problem solving style. We've got somebody who and this is data from from teams that we've worked with. You know, what are the facts? What are the issues? What are the questions related to that? What are our proposed solutions? How are we going to analyze it? What's our plan? When are we going to check in? What are our milestones? And what's the timeline, right? And also the diversity of perspective, respected and engaged with, right? And then on the other end, on the orange end, what we call the more innovative end, that's the lots of brainstorming. What if okay to say things wild and crazy, lots of flexibility, open to new ideas, willingness to change. What if we just set aside the givens and built it from scratch? And I noticed what Steve said that was so important about imagining tomorrow, that we're still taking a lot of what we've got today into tomorrow. So when we think about different problem solving styles, and what you'll see, those of you who took your score will see that you got a score between 45 and 145. And that bell curve represents the distribution of scores in the population, whether you're in the United States, in Europe, Japan. There's a lot of research, by the way, backing up the Curtin Adaption Innovation Inventory. And so you can see where you fit compared to many of your colleagues. The point being that, and just to go to definitions, because I know lawyers like definitions, and I'm assuming engineers do as well. Style is how you prefer to solve problems, not how well. Being more adaptive, meaning having a lower score, which is not like you failed the test, but it's a descriptor of your style. It means that you prefer to solve problems associated with a more consensually agreed upon structure. So I noticed when Damien was describing I don't even know what to call it, the device that could stop a PWC, that there were constraints. That's like being more adaptive. When there are a lot of constraints, you want someone who really knows how to solve problems with a lot of constraints. On the other hand, you also want to be thinking outside the box too, as much as that's sort of an overused expression. But someone who's more innovative, in other words, if you have a higher score above 95, you prefer to solve problems with less structure and are less concerned that the structure be consensually agreed upon. And then remember, innovation is different than creativity. All styles are creative, because all creativity is the generation of a novel idea as part of problem solving. So when we talk about patenting a novel idea, that idea can be on the more adaptive end, on the more innovative end, or a blend. And it's likely actually a blend. And then of course, novel is just something that's so new and original. All right, so we're gonna launch a poll here. And the question is do you consider yourself more structured or adaptive than most of your colleagues? Do you consider yourself kind of in the middle? Or do you consider yourself less structured than most? All right, I'm seeing it come in. Okay. Interestingly, about 20% of you, as it's coming in, actually, no, about 45% of you, sorry, I read it wrong. Being on the more innovative end, it's harder for me to pay attention to all the numbers. About 50% of you see yourself as being pretty similar to your colleagues. And then actually 27 and 25% see yourselves as more or less structured. So Cynthia, if you need to publish that, go ahead, so everybody can see that. All right, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, notice how that's just the way the distribution of the bell curve, right? So that doesn't surprise me. All right, so let's take a look at what we're really talking about and deeper into the theory. Okay, whoops. All right, I'm having a little technology challenge here. So, so when we have structure in our daily life, we have structure everywhere in our daily life. So whether we're talking about language, we're talking about norms for working together, we're talking about traffic rules, hopefully you never see a light like that, or, you know, science and engineering. You know, there's certain things that are, there's structure, and there's either more structure or less structure. Sometimes structure gives us the answer to the problem, and sometimes it limits it. So that's the paradox of structure, which is the seemingly incongruent notion that structure enables problem solving, but it also limits problem solving. So somebody who is more structured is going to gravitate towards finding the answer within the structure, you know, that the structure is a given. Someone who is on the more innovative end, so less structured, is going to gravitate towards solving the problem outside of the current structure or inside the current structure, kind of like it doesn't matter. Another example of structure and the paradox of structure is the human eye, right? So we as humans, we see pretty well during the day, not so well at night. And to see differently, in other words, like to see microscopically or see the stars, we need to alter the structure with either a microscope or a telescope. That's an example of a structure that is fixed and then an alteration. The point is here that we have structure in our daily life. And in fact, we need structure. And when we need structure to even know that something's not working, right? You know, that we've broken the rules. For example, we didn't get to the patent office first, that sort of thing. So let's take a look at what the curve looks like. And those of you who took the assessment ahead of time are going to see that it's all relative. And that's why I've got more adaptive, more innovative, but for ease of languaging, just talking about adapters are really good at using structure. Innovators are really good at solving problems despite the structure. And as you can see, that you've got that bell curve, which is that there is a normal distribution. So most of the people are within 95 plus or minus 2 standard deviations, which is about 40 points. So, you know, 55 to 125. We also, it's important that when we're looking at solving problems to remember that the more adaptive you are, the more you're going to want to keep that structure in place to solve the problem. So your solutions are going to be about about making the current system better. Sorry, we had a cat join us. Or doing it, and if you're more innovative, you're going to want to do it differently. So what do examples of this look like? So examples look like a more adaptive solution is like digging into and lowering the cost of operations or improving the efficiency of operations. The operations are kind of the same, but it's like that constant refinement or continuous improvement. Instituting standard operating procedures. Everybody's on the same page. Things are going well, smoothly. You know, there's no inefficiencies caused by lack of following a system or a structure. Things like defining a quality tracking system or revitalizing. I feel like I didn't even know what the theme was, but revitalizing today's system for tomorrow. That is an adaptive challenge, right? Although you will need probably some help from your more innovative colleagues. So the more examples of doing different is finding a new way to save or make money, finding unexpected markets or uses for products, services, that sort of thing. Generating discontinuous novelty. So that differs from sort of this continuous improvement in terms of, you know, you just have an idea and let's do it differently. It's not part of a process. It's more part of a light bulb moment. Changing to a new system is clearly a more innovative. It is the definition of innovative. And then like developing new technology. By the way, you know, just as a pitch for your patent team, you know, you want to get those ideas in early to preserve them for the Navy. So those are some ideas. So you're probably wondering, gosh, like, what do we look like? So of the people that took the KAI, this is what the distribution looks like. And we'll provide these slides and information so you can all have this. Notice that you've got clumping in the middle, which is what you would expect, because, you know, you would just imagine that, that there's a normal distribution. There is typically not a, you know, an ideal for any particular profession. And I've worked with a lot of leaders that have been on the more adaptive end and the more innovative end and in the middle. It's just how you do it. And what I would say as well as your openness to new ideas and different ways of thinking makes you an even better team member because you're able to really leverage the different and understand and maximize your team members' ways of thinking. I do note, however, that you've got some people on the very innovative end, but you've got some clumping down there. So you've got some really, really adaptive members of your team. So these are the people who are really good at, we've got a lot of givens and let's figure out how to make this work. All right. So
And can I ask a question from someone in the chat? This is like, would groups with similar styles reach a point of stagnation within an organization?
ooh, that is a really good question.
Yeah, I thought it was relevant for this.
Yeah. So here, let me maybe give you some more context for this. At 10 points in different style, you end up noticing that, you know, you end up starting to notice like, hey, that person's a little more structured or less structured than I am. And certainly at 20 points, you notice they're very, you know, they're very different. So just as again, in terms of context, it's not that you need people from the far ends and people in the middle, but what makes for the best team is sort of, I'm not gonna, you know, without, you know, it's like a span of like at least, you know, kind of 40 or 50. I will tell you, in having done work with this assessment for 8 or 9 years, and also with other assessments for longer than that, teams just don't end up being that close together and that ideal. They just don't end up going that way. I think if you did end up with a team that were sort of all within a 10-point range, it would be a feeling of stagnation. It would feel really smooth, but you wouldn't get new ideas. One of the things that when we do this as a workshop and have people talking about it is that when you ask like, well, what do you what do the people who are more adaptive appreciate about the people who are more innovative? And they almost always will say, they make me think outside my comfort zone. They push me to think differently. And then when you ask people about, well, what do you think about your more adaptive colleagues? What do you appreciate about them? It's like, boy, they make sure we don't make a mistake. Even joke around, they make sure we comply with the rules so we don't go to jail, that kind of thing. So like, yes, I think there's stagnation if you only work on a team with people who are very similar. But I will also add to that, you can be very, very intentional and really have some fun in imagining your tomorrow, right? And that is to have groups of people working on teams, like to pull together ideas that are the same and then run it like a hackathon and then put a disruptor in there to ask a lot of questions. You know, so like a team, for example, of 70 to 80, have them get as far as they can get on an idea and then add somebody in who's like a 120, or a few people who are 120s. So then you get the idea formulated and sort of thought through, and it's easy to work with people who think like you. It's kind of like we've got, you know, our secret handshake or whatever. It just works well. But then when you've got it coalesced enough, you add the, you know, the disruptors in to get you to think differently and add benefits. We've had a lot of fun and got great results when we've done those sorts of things.
That's cool. So what about like, so I remember you mentioned in the beginning, like the old pictures with like one colors, right?
Yeah.
But, and I don't think this is a question, is a thing, but like, does it change with age? Like, can you be less innovative? Cause I'm just wondering, it's like for Carter Rock's demographic, you have, you know, the older population, there's a gap, and then the younger. So like, as people are retiring, there's that gap. Do you think
Yeah.
that with age, like the younger people, you know, maybe all like one thing, and then like, I mean, does age have a factor? I don't know.
Well, you know, it's interesting because over the last 20 years, I've worked with teams, or we've worked with teams that have been, you know, the millennials everywhere, you know, up to, you know, close to 80 years old. And you see it's a distribution across age too. It's always kind of humorous when you see somebody who's like, you know, 22, who's like all buttoned up, you know, meaning more adaptive. So that's the answer to that question. Your problem solving style is probably determined by genetics. And this assessment has been out since the mid 70s. And Dr. Curtin did a lot of research, and his team did a lot of research. So people just don't change on test retest. I mean, you may be a few points different because you had coffee that morning or something. But, and then also in the assessment, there's an internal consistency. So we can tell if, not like if somebody's trying to game the system, but for example, we can tell if somebody is like super stressed at work, they answer the questions a certain way. So we know that the results aren't really accurate. So it's not really like a cholesterol test, if you know what I mean, or blood pressure, but there's a lot, but we can tell a lot from the score, you know, and it doesn't matter on age, and you stay the same over test retest.
Thanks.
All right, cool. So anyway, so I thought that was really interesting, and not a surprise actually to see a little bit more on the adaptive end. And then I'm just going to show you this slide from a recent team that we worked with. This is like a typical team, right? They're all lawyers, by the way. They do employment law, and they work at a corporation. And you've got a range of 64 to 100. Notice there's a clumping in the middle. So even with you know, only about 7 or 8 people there, it still is consistent with what you would expect just based statistically, right? And, you know, just to emphasize the point that there is no perfect style, or my husband would always say, you know, his style is perfect style, but, you know, I'm sure many of us have spouses who say that. But the point really being that we are, you know, that there's a normal distribution, and you would expect to see that across most professions, you know. And when we think about problem solving style, and the paradox of structure, again, is this idea that structure is enabling and limiting. The key difference is how we prefer to deal with those structures, either mismanaging or managing the paradox. What I can say, my score is a 136. So, you know, I'm all the way at the end there almost. So there's not many people like me. And, but my style, like the 136 style, it doesn't work for everything, right? So there are many things that I do in terms of like putting together agendas for clients, all that sort of thing. We all learn to flex, what we call flex or cope, and utilize behaviors that are up and down that continuum so that we can be successful. So we're all flexible. We just have a preference as to where we want to be. So the question then comes like, well, how do we calibrate our style? And also, what does it look like when we're working with others? So your composite score is made up of 3 subscores. So brainstorming, implementation, and then rule group conformity. So your brainstorming style, or what's called sufficiency of originality, which is a defined term. It's not about whether you're sufficiently original or not. Your brainstorming style, it measures the degree to which you are free or cautious when it comes to sharing ideas. So if you look at this slide, you'll see that someone who is more adaptive or an adapter is compared to someone who's more innovative. So remember, it's comparison. That's one of the great things about using this as a team understanding tool, is that they have fewer ideas, but those ideas fit in the structure already in place. So you're like ready to use them because you expect them to work because you aren't making any kind of changes to the structure or any major changes, right? Safe, sound, concrete, manageable. And the more innovative ideas, on the other hand, people who are more innovative, they have a lot of ideas, but you expect many of the ideas to never get off the drawing board, right? They're sort of exciting, that blue sky, new dawn. They can kind of freak people out sometimes, especially like I know that one of the things that I've learned to do over time is I recognize when somebody's very much on the adaptive end, that I make sure I caveat my ideas with well, I know we'd have to do a lot of work on this, but we could do this, because I don't want someone who's more adaptive to get concerned that we're talking about implementing something right away that hasn't been thoroughly vetted. The other thing that you'll notice is that, and we're going to get to what the vetting looks like, but the more adaptive might hold back their ideas because they're actually processing, and they're not holding back in that way of holding back, or that they're not, or that they're shy in some way or not confident. It's more like they're working through everything because they want to make sure that when they share an idea, it's ready to go. So again, like a different in style, whereas someone who's more innovative, we'll share all of our ideas, hoping that somebody will pick out a good one for us. When we talk about the implementation style, this is actually the efficiency score. So it's really not about whether you're efficient or not. Again, defined term. It measures the degree to which you prefer method, process, and structure when you go about implementing ideas and solving problems. So the more adaptive, they want to be precise, reliable, thorough. From my perspective as someone who's more innovative, they're solving the problem on paper before they solve the problem. So you can appreciate this being engineers. You don't want to be building a bridge and sort of being like, oh, I don't know, how much concrete do you think we should use? How much steel should we use? Like, no, that's worked out all ahead of time, right? So again, like in what you'll find, excuse me, in meetings often is that the people who are more adaptive will ask the kind of questions who are really detailed that come across to like the practicality of implementation, like how do we make this work? If we're making the first iPhone or coming up with the curved, corners, how does that happen? How do we make that work? Curved corners were actually like a big deal, way back. People are more adaptive, they welcome change as an improver. They seek solutions in tried and tested ways. Again, like it's all about it going extremely well, everything buttoned down, no failure. The more innovative, again, they're going to likely think tangentially, approach the problem from unsuspected angles, welcome changes in a mold breaker, wanting to do it differently. So, imagining tomorrow is going to have elements that are the same, more adaptive, but doing it better, and innovative, which are, just a shift, a paradigm shift, and you'll see more innovative people will tend to manipulate the problem, even questioning if that's the problem or if it even is a problem.
Hi, Ann, again, sorry. What about if people are like aggressive towards people that have the different styles? Because we know we're trying to change this cultural environment of acceptance of the diversity of thought and thinking, and we see that our teams are balanced one way or the other. But what if you have those people that really are having that hard time inviting people that have those different styles, because that does happen, especially when there's like breakdowns in communication.
Yeah, and when people are under stress, right? I mean, it happens mostly when people are under stress. And the bottom line is that the last year has been kind of a stressful one. So, I mean, one thing is to send them to me for some individual coaching, but in all seriousness, it's helping people see the benefit. First of all, we're all on the same page. We're trying to work through this. It's the listening so you can think, and asking the person who's maybe upset, what's your concern here? How can we help here? But it's asking questions to make sure that to shift thinking and have people reframe the issue. So it's like we're all on the same page. We're just trying to approach a different perspective. Ashley, I can actually send you a copy of some slides that show how to be a dissenter and how to raise unpopular concerns. So I know Cynthia's on and she'll remind me of that. And you're welcome to share that with everybody, but it's all about asking questions, good questions.
Of course. So that's actually good. You mentioned something about fire because someone did ask this earlier and I wanted to bring it into good context. So like say, for example, like if there's a fire and you have the different types of thinkers, would it be a different approach? Like if someone is like acting as if there's a fire or like a potential fire, meaning when you have a certain kind of problem, because, you know, we see different problems. Does like time constraints or crisis level or damage control, health issues, like does all of that have a factor into like which thinking styles can be better?
Well, so most problems are what we call complex problems, which means that you need elements of every kind of thinking to be involved. So like Cynthia and I and Esther and I work together, we are spread out on the continuum. And it's great because we each raise different issues and bring something different to it. The big thing, which you already alluded to, is recognizing that everybody's there to help. We're all pulling in the same direction. And that you want, it's those glasses. It's like, I want you to tell me what I'm not seeing. That's the thing. So when we, this, by the way, this slide, this quote is really a quote from The More Innovative. Failure is not the opposites of success, it's part of success. So just making the point here that everybody likes pilot programs, because if you can do something on a small scale, you know, the innovators get to try something out and the adapters get to control the potential damage, but it's a good way to make sure that that you're making progress and trying different things. And that actually goes to the point, actually, let me go back to that, is that people who are more innovative are less risk or are more willing to take risks. People who are more adaptive are more risk averse. So that's Ashley, that's part of what your question is. I show you this picture of a sailing ship because as we're imagining tomorrow, remember that back in the 1800s, this is how goods came from England to the US. And some innovative person imagined that, hey, we could create a better tomorrow by having steamboats bring the goods over. But of course, there was a problem, and that was that the fuel was so heavy that it caused many of the boats to capsize. So thankfully, some more adaptive folks, engineers, I'm sure, figured out how to make the system better. So remember, system imagined, make the system better so that it would actually operate. So notice here how important it is to have input from everybody along the continuum to be able to have ideas that actually work, things running smoothly. Now, when we talk about the last of the subscores, it's rule group conformity or management of structure. And it's really about how do you deal with group norms and how do you deal with rules. So the more adaptive you are, remember, you're all about structure. You like the structure in place. You want to maintain continuity, stability, group cohesion. So consensus is important. And you're not likely to challenge authority because that's part of structure, right? So I encourage all of you who are working with very junior people who you suspect are more adaptive to really make that person feel comfortable and that it's part of his or her job to ask difficult questions and to challenge, because that's how you get the best thinking out of that person. In this regard as well, when we talk about rules like the tax code, like filing patents, you know, it's the using rules to solve the problem and not changing those rules or structure, and only when everybody agrees to. And then on the innovative end, I can just say, you know, please forgive us poor innovators if we're, you know, a little bit imprudent with authority, because that just, we kind of don't see it sometimes. We just have questions. So that can be viewed as kind of impertinent by someone who's more adaptive. And note that the more innovative will be a catalyst to consensual views. So not as bound by how things are done, because that's what you would expect. And again, willing to, what I would say about myself as someone who's really on the innovative end is happy to alter rules to solve the problems, challenge rules, customs, and consensual views to do it better and what I would consider better and differently, but also know which rules I have to pay attention to, like filing my tax return on April 15th. So again, we've got these differences in style. This is your bell curve again. You can kind of see, again, your spread all the way across. When we talk about being more adaptive and more innovative, so you actually, if you know, obviously the people on either end are adapters or innovators, but even if this person on the right goes almost all the way over to the left, that person is still more innovative than the person on the left. And that is true regardless of where they are on the continuum. So one of the great benefits of this as an assessment and as a framework for thinking about problem solving styles is you just have to notice if someone seems more or less structured than you are to be able to think about how to work with them most effectively. It's a little bit like height, you know, Adam, is he taller than that? I don't know. Well, he's certainly not as tall as Ian, but Ian isn't as tall as Mark. So we talk about cognitive diversity and really harnessing all of this so that problem B, actually, this is what your question was about earlier when people get upset about people raising different concerns. That's problem B. And the problem really is, you know, how about perceptions. So people who are super adaptive or adapters might perceive high innovators as abrasive, unsound, impractical, too challenging like it's a bad thing, risky, and creating confusion. And high innovators might perceive high adapters as picky, compliant, predictable, overly cautious, conforming, and intolerant of ambiguity. Again, like all of those things are bad things, right? So the question that you raise is like, what do you do when this happens, when people are looking at the situations differently, to make sure that everybody, like Amanda and Ian here, are pulling in the same direction? And basically it's just to stay curious, you know, ask people what their concerns are, you know, what's the benefit? Help me understand what concerns you. What am I missing here? Because you just have to know that regardless of where you are on the continuum, you're probably missing something, or at least somebody's seeing an issue slightly differently. And again, we're going to share a copy of these slides so that you have these, but in calibrating your style. So if I'm more innovative and I'm working with someone who is more adaptive, I'm going to look to that blue field and say like, yep, I got to provide agenda, timelines, timetables. I've got to be specific. I've got to expect specific questions. I'm going to know, I already said, like, I'm not going to scare them with too many ideas. I'm not going to try not to appear haphazard. And I'm going to be deferential to my leaders and acknowledge roles, responsibilities. On the other hand, if I'm in the, you know, more adaptive and I'm working with someone who's more innovative, I'm going to remember, like, you know, I've got to be more flexible. I'm not going to take everything as a we're going to do it and move forward unless you've confirmed it's a go. I'm going to understand that brainstorming is a contact sport because the more innovative just love it. And that's where you get all that non-linear thinking, sort of crazy ideas, you know, and a lot of challenges to the status quo, that kind of thing. Generally, it's okay to challenge somebody who's more innovative, like to push their thinking and to give them pushback. The point here as well is that everybody is creative, right? It irrespective of your style, and we need you. We need everybody as we're imagining tomorrow. So remember that level is how creative you are, and style is how you are creative. Because most problems, as I said before, are complex. The simple problems you don't even worry about, but complex problems require a team that has a lot of different skill sets, meaning that you've got people on the team from all along the continuum. So I'm curious to ask you all right now, and just put your answers in the chat. What do you appreciate about people who are different than you are? Put your answers in the chat here.
And Anne, while they're doing that, we have a question in the chat. So it'd be interesting to know if there's a connection with an organization's turnover rate. For example, the slide with the lawyers KAI curve, there was a clustering in the middle and the sole person at one end of the curve.
Oh, such a good question. Such a good question. So interestingly, like let's just take like an organization that does a lot of marketing, and then you've got a CFO, and I just picked those two because they're so different. You know, the marketing people are thinking outside the box. They're trying to push the envelope. They're engaging in different kind of, and the CFOs tend to be more structured. That's at least what I've seen. And I've worked with a lot of CFOs. So if you have, you know, that CFO is that one person that has that really low score and everybody's got higher scores, whether there's turnover in that role depends entirely on whether that role and what's required on that role is respected. So in other words, you know, if the need for cost controls, the need for a plan, the need for numbers that are, you know, that are accurate, if that's respected and the CFO is respected and appreciated, you've got no problem. But if the CFO is viewed as an annoyance and getting in the way of progress, that you'll end up having turnover in that role. All right. Did anybody put anything in about what they appreciate about the different styles? I can't really see. I'm a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot coming in the chat, and I wanted to change my
Wow.
background to something from the movie. I think, I don't know, I forgot what was the movie entitled, but it was when it was happy and joy and anger and sad, and they were all like working in one brain. And that's a lot of like our
Inside Out. Inside Out.
yeah, Inside Out. Inside Out was like, that was like what's in your own head, but also I feel like what's in teams, because you have someone who they all looked at the same things that the little girl was going through in different eyes. And so like they have like, you know, people understanding, like I said, like willingness to challenge, it says seeking innovative types and needing adaptive types to plan. There's people that said providing alternatives to the approaches, helps me identify how different I am. It was, yeah, the chat is really good.
Yeah.
Keep it coming, guys.
Yeah, very good. Very awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to move on for a minute to, and by the way, I could like do this all afternoon. But I know we have a schedule. Let's look at change. Okay. So everybody likes change. It's not that the more adaptive like change more or the innovative like it less, which is kind of the reputation, or at least if you're not thinking critically about the definition of more adaptive and more innovative. The more adaptive you are, the more you like changes that make a system better. Like it's like refine. And the more innovative you are, it's about having a different system. So I love this slide. I've actually gotten a lot of laughs. One of my more adaptive colleagues has said like, oh no, we're trying to buy a house right now. I want everything perfect from the outset. But the point here is really that the more adaptive a person is, it's like they'll continue to put a coat of paint on, you know, keep the same house, make it better and better and better. Whereas the more innovative person, get rid of the house. It's not worth keeping. The tension comes between like who gets to make that decision. So the more adapters will hold on to the old way of doing things too long, and innovators will likely discard the system too early. So that's the tension here when it comes to change. But it's important to remember that, you know, structure is necessary. Everybody manages change, and no one accepts or rejects all change. Again, it's all about using those questions to try to you know, really leverage and maximize the value that everybody of different problem solving styles brings to a process and change as you're imagining the future. Something else that I find to be really interesting about the KAI is that the lower your score is, so the more adaptive you are, the more likely you are to look internally for threats and opportunities and try to figure out like, how does this work? And make sure that everything is running very, very smoothly. Hence, if you remember the standard operating procedures, coming up with systems, that sort of thing. And the more innovative you are, the more likely you are to look outside an organization at threats and opportunities, and your focus will be there. So just to remember that as you're working with colleagues. Importantly, you know, different styles does not equal lack of ability. You know, we wouldn't expect Greta to have the same skill set that, you know, Rex does there. And vice versa. And the important thing is just to, you know, take advantage of the fact that you do have, I already know you do, because I've seen your KAIs, you do have a really varied teams. So just kind of this summary slide, you know, the more adaptive, they want to be efficient, thorough, methodical, organized, precise. There's, you know, they accept the problem definition. They want to do things better. They're concerned with resolving problems, not finding them. I like that. And they're not going to reinvent the wheel. And they're going to reduce problems by improvement of the process in place rather than a new process. And they seem to be, as one of my friends says, impervious to boredom because they continue to be able to refine the system that's in place. Whereas the more innovative are kind of ingenious, original, independent, unconventional, they'll challenge the definition of the problem. They want to do things differently. That's how they keep themselves engaged. They'll discover more problems and avenues for their solutions. Again, that looking outside. And they tend to manipulate the problem by questioning basic assumptions. Again, like you need people kind of, I don't even want to say both sides, but all along the continuum so that you're coming up with the best solutions as you reimagine tomorrow. So
I wanted to ask a question about that. So are there exercises, so say if you're in a role or facing a problem where you have to be one or the other, like, you know, shift your scale.
Yeah.
Is there exercises that like somebody could do to like help them be that other side?
Yeah. Or at least develop those skills that are on this other side. Because remember, you don't change who you're being, but you change your behavior, right? You know, so first of all, we all learn from each other, you know, like for me, putting together agendas, I'm on the more innovative end. I put together agendas, make lists, we have checklists, all of those things, which by the way, aren't just a burden, but help us to be more, help me to be more organized, which I need. On the more adaptive end, I had a great conversation with a client and a friend a couple of years ago who is adaptive. And she wanted to know, how do I be more innovative? And so we went through the coaching model, which essentially breaks down problem solving into 5 steps. So, you know, you establish the focus. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And then the 3 sort of messy steps in the middle are brainstorm options, create an action plan, identify and remove obstacles, and then the recap. The key is, if you want to be more innovative, is to stay in that brainstorming space, like and not let yourself go to the place of what are all the things wrong with this solution. That'll help you think outside the box. And the other thing is really, and so the other thing is suspending judgment. And this is all the way around, staying really curious about what your colleagues are offering up. What the questions are that they raise. There are also other techniques like, you know, using Post-its on a board, you know, what are all your ideas, kind of gathering them. You can use a tool like Stormboard, or Teams might have something like that, Stormboard, to be able to collect ideas. But it's the staying in that idea generation phase really, really helps with being more innovative. Great question. I see one here. Do people in the innovative range tend to be extroverts? Yeah, they do actually. And
so does it show like what jobs? Yeah, like most of the questions, they haven't been me asking. I've just been reading them from others and weaving them into the conversation. But that's a good question. So because of that, is there like any studies to show like what certain jobs will be better for, you know, if you're more adaptive or innovative?
So by the way, I do a lot of job coaching and counseling and career change and that sort of thing. It's when we talk about a job, I mean, that's like such it's more nuanced than that. It's working with people who appreciate what your skill set is, especially if you're really different, you know, especially if you're on one end or the other. I can tell you from coaching for like, you know, close to 20 years and working with teams, like I said, I've seen CEOs that are all the way along the continuum, CFOs actually all the way along the continuum, although they do tend to be more adaptive. So it's not that a person can't do the job. It's more about, you know, is their approach really appreciated and respected? We actually did an executive team retreat yesterday morning, and there was one of the more senior people is definitely on the innovative end. And she so appreciates, she promoted 2 people to the executive team who who are more adaptive than she is, because that helps to make sure that her ideas get implemented properly. I say that though, not wanting to make sure that nobody takes that if they're more adaptive, they're not able to be a leader or whether it's a titled position or an intellectual leader in their field. It's just that you do it differently. That's really the thing.
Thank you. And I guess so, because you just said that it's not really related to jobs. What about like should these be considered in hiring processes? Like, have you seen that, or and if so, how do people do that?
So interesting that you asked that. I get asked all the time, like everybody wants like the secret sauce for how do I hire the perfect employee, right?
Yes.
And who's going to be a good fit on my team? In fact, I actually have a client who hired somebody who he knew was going to shake things up on his team because that's what he wanted. So these aren't validated for, so I'll give you the standard answer. This assessment, Myers-Briggs, they're not validated for, for choosing jobs, but, or hiring. But what I can say is that behavioral interviewing, like how have you handled this situation? So it's not that you're necessarily focused on someone who is like, I got to hire an adapter, I got to hire an innovator, but you want to look at the whole person, including how, like, are they a good team member? Like, does Steve care what his team members think if we're looking at hiring Steve? Does Steve, is he, or is he defensive? I know you're not defensive, Steve, but like that kind of thing. Is it my way or the highway? So it's more nuanced than that. You do look at skill sets. And although I will say that all that said, I listened to a podcast and we can send you this information about adapters and innovators, and someone who knew the theory actually chose a brain surgeon based on the fact between two that he thought one of them was more adaptive because he wanted the brain surgeon to be like following, the process. I would say that's pretty specific though. I might actually think that too.
But see, if someone needs to operate in my brain and this isn't in the books, I need him to be innovative.
Well,
like,
yeah,
save me.
That's the thing,
Save me.
So it's one way or another, Are there, I can't always see the questions. Are there more questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, this one says they come from another point of view. So if someone, I guess, comes from another point of view, is sometimes far off base, but makes it stop and think. Adaptive people, or maybe this is more of a comment. Like different people come from different points of views and it's sometimes far off of what we think, but it does make us think. And so adaptive people help us to implement and sell structured ideas. And then, so an actual question, one says, is someone more adaptive? Is someone that is more adaptive likely to become easily innovative? And what about the other way around? I think you had talked about it a little bit earlier, but
let me readdress that, because the thing is, that one thing that happens, and this is just because of the languaging of it, is everybody wants to be innovative. But I can tell you, it's like kind of hard to be innovative sometimes, because I should not touch technology because I have a hard time and I get bored with tracking all the rules and all the things that I have to do. Cynthia sort of won't let me do that, thankfully. So you don't change your style, kind of on test retest, you're going to be within 10 points. But what you will do as you have more life experiences is you're going to realize like, oh, okay, I'm meeting with this person, Joe seems really on the adaptive end. Let me make sure that I'm laying everything out, the agenda. We have a lot of process. Let me make sure he feels comfortable that everything is buttoned down. We actually have a client like that. There was so much planning for this workshop. It was shocking, but that's what she needed to be able to be comfortable moving forward, that everything was buttoned down. So, but what happens is you learn other behaviors, you know what I mean? And you also, here's the thing is you got to embrace who you are, right? Like just own it, your strengths, the things you don't do that well. I like to make jokes about myself in that way. We all have things that are hard for us, But the thing is that, own it and be open to other ways of thinking, because that's how you learn. Cynthia and my husband, interestingly, have the same KAI score. And I learn a lot from both of them. And that's the thing, is I learn about approaches, and that's how to think about it. Like, how can I learn from this person who is really different from me? And learn the technique. It's not that you're changing who you are, but you're learning the technique and just becoming more nuanced. It's a little bit like that client that I mentioned that said, well, now that I know my style, I know how to deploy it better. And implicit was, and I know how, when my style isn't going to actually, natural style isn't going to work, and I'm going to do something a little bit differently. Problem solving style to me, like this explains so much, because we all come to work to solve problems. So it's like, oh, okay, now I understand. This person isn't being nitpicky with me. He or she just wants to know the details to get a level of comfort. Or this other person isn't trying to blow my ideas out of the water. They can't help with all the ideas, that kind of thing. And I would say, like, right now, things are, we've been in this pandemic for like almost a year now, and on email, it's really hard to take, it's really easy to misread things and take things the wrong way, because we're all so busy and juggling everything. So, giving a little grace in that way, and also just including in that recognition that there's different styles.
Yeah, that was actually funny on Microsoft Teams. My coworker accidentally wrote in all caps, and I said, "Are you yelling at me?" I called them. Said, "What are you doing?" Because you do lose that aspect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did. There's one more question too before people start dropping off. One could suppose that where a person falls on the spectrum could be easily influenced by the organization that person is a part of. So, say if the organization makes innovation difficult, a person might be more adaptive, where in other environments they would be more innovative. Do you find this to be the case when assessing individuals?
Well, let me just say that it's like having those glasses on. Cynthia can pipe in if she wants to, or I'll just tell her story. But she's right in the middle of the continuum. So people right in the middle can be viewed as like innovative by the people who are real adaptive, or as adaptive by the people who are real innovative. And when she worked at the University of Maryland, I think I'm going to get this right, the University of Maryland, and worked in like a regulatory office. She actually had someone in a meeting say, "Can we tell her to stop talking because she had too many ideas?" So she's like right in the middle, but like around me, she's more innovative, right? And so it's perspective.
Yeah, there actually is another question that popped up, like about the perspective. So someone wrote, "I don't believe I'm any of these. I'm all three. So I adapt my style to the challenge at hand, and make up whatever they're lacking, for the team." And your experience is like, is that what you see, or is it like arrogance on their part?
I actually, so first of all, the very fact of the way that question is asked, first of all, it makes me smile. And second, it makes me think that the person is very, very self-aware and aware of others. So understands that there are different styles, as opposed to like, there's just one way to do this. You know what I mean? That's when you get people angry, it's because like, what are you doing? This is the one way to do it. Why are you messing things up for me? So my guess would be that this person, like I have like maybe 50% confidence, is like kind of on the more innovative end, because the thing is that the life requires a lot of adaptive skills. And so you just learn those growing up. You know what I mean? And so I do think that more people who are more innovative probably have an easier time learning adaptive skills, because it's just like from the time they start going to school, there are all these rules, like kindergarten, like you do this, there's times to do this, like all that kind of thing. Whereas you don't have that kind of like constant almost coaching all the way through your life to be innovative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and kind of like what I felt too. I always felt like I was the weird engineer because I didn't quite measure up to other ones. They were like so much better. I'm like, I'm the okay engineer. I tell Steve all this. So I said, I'm a good engineer, but I'm great with people too. So how can I, put that? But I think it's the self-awareness that what
Yeah,
I see exposing to others for us to learn is like, hey, you know what? I thought something was wrong with me. No, it's nothing wrong. I just think a little bit differently, and here's where the strengths are, and now pair me with someone to help with the weaknesses. So this is what this is showing. I love it. I love it. We're going to post this all over Carter Rock.
right. All right. Fantastic. Any more? Let me do a time check here. We have a little bit more time if anybody has any questions. Anything? I mean,
Well, they did have some comments. Someone said, I love, love, love when Carter Rock hosts these types of discussions. Thanks, Carter Rock, for hosting this topic. And thanks, Anne, for such an engaging webinar. So yes, more of these. And that is, and someone said a really good statement. The person is not nitpicking, but needs more details for comfort. The person is not blowing me away, but cannot work at all.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let me tell you something. I so appreciate people who are different than I am because I want people to catch things, before it becomes a mistake. You know what I'm saying? Well, Steve, what did you think?
Let me unmute myself here. So very, very interesting. Obviously, the things that resonated with me were you really have to walk into a room or a team event and really know yourself. You have to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. And then kind of the second thing, and there's a variety of ways to try to learn about yourself. You've obviously presented several here. But the second thing is, once you get in that room, what can you do? You have to appreciate and know the benefit to having a diverse set of teammates. You need to know that's a good thing, and you have to appreciate that in order to do that. So and then all of your advice about being curious and how if I'm walking in with a certain characteristic that I've got to be open to this or adaptable to that, or know this or know that about somebody else. And so I think that's great. I think the challenge for us as leaders is trying to make sure that we get and we know enough about folks to get a good team together, to get a match together, to get to know that that's going to be a functioning team. So
yeah. I think those are all great insights. Doing things like I will send you that package of how to engage. It's basically a handout that we put together on how to engage people and create a really collaborative environment. And it also includes, getting dissenting views, differing views, that kind of thing. And then using the questions, asking lots of good questions about concerns. What concerns you here? What do you see here? What's important to you here? All really, really important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's any more comments or questions. Looks like we got like 1 more minute or so to go here.
I was just going to say that I think that this is a good webinar too, especially when you get your leadership involved, because now if there's an issue, we can say, hey, Steve, Larry, got some issues, like, because they're on board. They love this and participating in, and you have the WDTD right here listening. So he got informed just like we did. So now it opens for those safe communication.
Yeah. So, kind of to wrap things up, I'd really appreciate, Anne, you sharing your time with us and imparting, the lessons that you've learned over a couple of decades of doing this kind of coaching and learning more about people and group dynamics and organizations and how they perform. So, again, from the Carter Rock family to you, thank you very, very much for sharing with us, and we look forward to getting the material and trying to put to good use all the things that you've told us. So again, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. It's been a pleasure meeting you all, and look forward to seeing you all again. Take care.
All right. Thank you very much.